Smell of pine resin and wet earth had become my religion. Every morning for the past 3 months, I woke to that scent. Sharp, honest, unforgiving. It clung to my clothes, my hair, the skin of my forearms where I'd scraped them raw against bark and stone. The cabin didn't welcome me gently. It demanded sacrifice, and I gave it willingly, because pain I could understand. Pain had rules. You bled, you healed, you moved forward. Unlike marriage. Unlike love. Unlike the man who'd looked at me across our pristine kitchen one Tuesday morning and said, with the emotional inflection of someone ordering coffee, "I don't think I ever really loved you, Claire." My name is Claire Whitmore, though I'd spent 5 years as Claire Hendricks. A name that never quite fit, like borrowed shoes that pinch with every step. Now, 28 years old, and legally separated from a life I'd built on foundations of sand, I was Claire again. Just Claire. The woman with pale blonde hair that caught on rough cabin walls, with hands blistered from hammering and hauling, with a heart that beat steadier now in silence than it ever had surrounded by the polite dinner parties and wine tastings of my former existence. The cabin sat 17 miles outside Millhaven, deep enough into the Thornwood forest that cell service became a luxury, and human voices a memory. My maternal grandfather had built it in the 70s. A hunting retreat he'd used twice before his heart gave out. It had sat abandoned for decades, slowly surrendering to moss and rot, until I'd shown up with a backpack, my grandmother's ancient pickup truck, and absolutely nowhere else to go. People in town thought I was insane. A woman alone out there? Mrs. Peterson had clucked at the general store, her eyes traveling over my slight frame with open skepticism. "Honey, there are things in those woods. Wild things." She hadn't meant bears. Everyone in Millhaven knew the stories. Whispered over morning coffee, shared with nervous laughter at the local bar. The Thornwood wasn't just forest. It was territory. Pack territory. The werewolves who lived in the deeper woods had an understanding with the town. Stay out of our way, and we'll stay out of yours. A truce older than anyone living could remember, maintained by distance and mutual disinterest. Except I'd planted myself right on the border. The cabin sat at the edge of claimed land, in a gray zone that belonged to no one and everyone. Technically legal, practically stupid, but I'd signed the divorce papers in a lawyer's office that smelled of lemon polish and broken promises, and I'd needed somewhere the world couldn't find me. So I'd chosen the one place even wolves might leave alone. The work consumed me. Replacing rotted floorboards, patching the roof where rain had turned the interior into a swamp, scrubbing years of animal droppings and decay from every surface. My body, soft from years of yoga classes and desk work, transformed slowly. Muscles appeared in my arms, calluses armored my palms. I stopped checking my reflection in the clouded bathroom mirror, because the woman staring back was a stranger, thinner, harder, with shadows under her eyes that spoke of nightmares and 4 a.m. wake-ups. But she was real. She was mine. By late October, the cabin had become almost livable. I'd installed a wood-burning stove, patched the worst of the wall gaps, and even managed to get the ancient well pump working again. The nights were getting cold, frost creeping across the windows in crystalline patterns that reminded me of wedding lace. I tried not to think about that. I tried not to think about a lot of things. But isolation has a way of making thoughts louder. On the night everything changed, I was sitting on the newly repaired porch, wrapped in a wool blanket that smelled of mothballs and old cedar. A mug of tea steamed in my hands. Chamomile, because sleep had been evasive lately, filled with dreams of empty houses and doors that locked from the outside. The forest was alive with sound, wind rushing through pine canopies, the distant call of an owl, the crack of branches that might have been deer, or might not have been. I'd learned to distinguish sounds out here. Deer moved with hesitant grace. Rabbits scattered in panicked bursts, but there were other sounds, heavier, more deliberate, that made something primal in my chest tighten with warning. The first time I'd heard wolves howling, I'd locked myself inside with shaking hands and a racing heart, but after weeks of hearing them echo through the darkness, the fear had dulled into something closer to acceptance. They were here. I was here. We existed in parallel, as long as I respected the boundaries. Tonight, though, the forest felt different. The usual symphony of night sounds had gone quiet. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I set down my tea, my fingers instinctively tightening on the blanket. In the 3 months I'd been here, I'd learned that silence in the forest meant something was wrong, something was watching. My eyes adjusted to the darkness beyond the porch light, a single bare bulb I'd wired myself, proud of the accomplishment even as it cast more shadows than illumination. The tree line was perhaps 20 yards away, a wall of black punctuated by the skeletal silhouettes of birch and pine. And standing just at the edge of that darkness, barely visible, was a shape. Too large to be a deer. Wrong proportions for a bear. My breath caught in my throat as my mind supplied the only logical answer, even as every instinct screamed at me to run inside and bolt the door. Wolf. But not just any wolf. Even from this distance, even in darkness, I could tell this was something extraordinary. It stood at least 4 feet at the shoulder, its fur so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Eyes glinted in the porch light, not the yellow gold of normal wolves, but an amber so bright it looked almost human. Almost. We stared at each other across the clearing. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might bruise. Every article I'd ever read about wolf encounters scrolled through my panic. Don't run. Don't make eye contact. Make yourself large. Back away slowly. But I couldn't move. The wolf took 1 step forward, massive paws silent on the frost-covered ground. Then another. It moved with a liquid grace that was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. Not aggressive, not yet, but radiating a power that made my human fragility painfully obvious. Please, I whispered, and hated how my voice shook. Please. I'm not in your territory. I checked. This land is... The wolf's head tilted, and impossibly, I would swear it looked curious. We stayed like that for an eternity compressed into seconds. Then, with a final long look that felt like assessment, judgment, and something else I couldn't name, the wolf turned and melted back into the trees. I didn't move for a full 5 minutes. When I finally stumbled inside on legs that felt like water, I locked every door, checked every window, and sat on my sleeping bag with my back against the wall until dawn painted the sky gray. I didn't sleep, and I couldn't shake the feeling that those amber eyes had seen straight through me. Through the cabin walls I'd so carefully repaired, through the brave face I showed the world, down to the broken thing I'd been trying so hard to rebuild. The knock came 3 nights later. I'd almost convinced myself the wolf encounter had been a sleep-deprived hallucination, my mind playing tricks after too many solitary evenings. I'd thrown myself back into work with renewed intensity, replacing the porch railing, splitting firewood until my shoulders screamed, organizing supplies with manic precision. Anything to avoid thinking, anything to avoid remembering those eyes. The knock wasn't timid or uncertain. It was firm, authoritative, the knock of someone who expected the door to be opened. I froze with a can of soup halfway to the camp stove, my entire body going rigid. No one came out here. No one even knew exactly where here was. I hadn't given the address to anyone. Not my mother and her Arizona retirement community. Not my few remaining friends who'd sent concerned texts that I'd let go unanswered. Not even the lawyer who'd finalized my divorce. Another knock, more insistent. My legs moved before my brain caught up, carrying me to the door. Through the small window, I could see a figure on the porch, tall, broad-shouldered, distinctly human. Relief and new fear tangled in my chest. Human was better than wolf, wasn't it? I cracked the door open 2 inches, leaving the chain lock engaged. The man on my porch was not what I expected. He was perhaps in his mid-30s, with dark hair that fell just past his collar, and a face that was all hard angles and controlled intensity. He wore dark jeans and a heavy jacket that looked expensive but practical. Nothing like the designer brands my ex-husband had favored, but it was his eyes that stopped my breath. Amber, bright, and intimately familiar. The same eyes that had watched me from the tree line 3 nights ago. Claire Whitmore, he said. And his voice was deep, carrying an edge of something that raised goosebumps on my arms. We need to talk. How do you know my name? The question came out steadier than I felt. My hand remained on the door, ready to slam it shut, even though some instinct told me it wouldn't matter. If this man wanted inside, a chain lock wasn't going to stop him. I know a lot of things. He didn't smile, didn't soften the statement with anything approaching friendliness, like the fact that you've been living on borderland for 3 months, that you're alone, that you're human. He said that last word with particular emphasis, as though it explained everything, and that you have no idea what kind of attention you've been attracting. My fingers tightened on the doorframe. I'm not bothering anyone. I checked the property records. This land isn't claimed by anyone. Property records. Now something that might have been amusement flickered across his face, gone too quickly to be sure. Human bureaucracy. The paper you filed with the county means nothing to the wolves who've been circling this cabin for weeks, wondering why someone would be foolish enough to settle here. Wolves. Plural. The reality of what he was saying, what he was implying about himself, hit me with delayed force. I'd known, theoretically, that werewolves were real. Everyone in Millhaven knew, but knowing and confronting were entirely different things. You're one of them, I said quietly. You're the wolf I saw. I am. No hesitation. No softening. My name is Dominic Ashford, and I'm the Alpha King of the Thornwood Pack, which means everything for 30 miles in any direction falls under my protection and my law. He paused, his gaze holding mine with uncomfortable intensity. Including you, whether you realize it or not, Alpha King. The title rolled through my mind, bringing with it fragments of overheard conversations from town, whispered warnings I'd dismissed as superstition and gossip. The Thornwood Pack wasn't just any pack. They were old blood, powerful, with a hierarchy as rigid as any monarchy, and I'd built my sanctuary right on their doorstep. I'll leave, I heard myself say. I didn't know. I'll pack up and... No, the word cut through my rising panic like a blade. It's too late for that. You've been seen, scented, marked as residing here. If you run now, you'll look like prey. And there are wolves in my pack, young ones, hungry ones, who wouldn't be able to resist the chase. My blood went cold. Then what am I supposed to do? For the first time, something that might have been uncertainty crossed his features. He glanced past me into the cabin, taking in the single room I'd worked so hard to make livable. The patched walls, the wood stove radiating heat, the sleeping bag in the corner, the boxes of supplies stacked with careful precision. You stay, he said finally. Under my protection, as part of my territory. I don't understand what that means. It means, he said slowly, as though choosing each word with care, that I claim responsibility for you. That any wolf who harms you answers to me. That you fall under pack law, even though you're human. His jaw tightened. It's not ideal. My pack won't like it, but it's safer than the alternative. I should have felt grateful. Instead, I felt trapped. I'd fled a marriage where I'd been controlled, shaped, told who to be and how to act. And now this stranger was telling me I belonged to his world, his rules, his protection whether I wanted it or not. And if I refuse, his eyes flashed with something dangerous. Then you die, Claire. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually, one of the younger wolves will decide you're fair game, or a rival pack will use you as a message to me, or you'll simply disappear one night and no one will ever find enough of you to bury. The bluntness of it stole my breath. No sugarcoating, no gentle warnings, just cold, brutal truth delivered in that deep voice that somehow made it more real. Why? I whispered. Why do you care? I'm nobody. Something shifted in his expression. Softened, maybe, though it was hard to tell in the porch light's harsh shadows. Because 3 nights ago, I came to investigate the humans stupid enough to live on borderland. And instead of running, instead of screaming, you sat there and spoke to me. He paused. You said, please. Like you were asking a person, not a monster. The memory flooded back, my whispered plea, the terror and strange calm that had followed. I was terrified. I know. I could smell it. He said it matter-of-factly, as though discussing the weather. But you didn't attack. You didn't try to shoot me. And I know you have a shotgun. I can scent the gun oil. You just... asked. He shook his head slightly. Most humans either try to kill us or treat us like animals. You did neither. I didn't know what to say to that. The silence stretched between us, filled with the sound of wind through pine trees and the distant crack of frost-split branches. I need to think, I managed. Think fast. I can give you tonight, but tomorrow, I need your answer. He turned to leave, then stopped. Lock your doors. Keep a fire burning. And Claire? He looked back over his shoulder. Don't try to run. The young wolves are watching and they're faster than you can imagine. Then he was gone, melting into the darkness with the same unnatural grace I'd seen in his wolf form. I stood in the doorway for a long time, cold air pouring into the cabin, my mind spinning in useless circles. I didn't sleep that night either. By dawn, I'd paced the cabin's length so many times I could have walked it blindfolded. My choices were terrifyingly simple. Accept this stranger's protection and whatever that entailed, or take my chances in a world that suddenly felt far more dangerous than I'd realized. But running meant going back to the city, back to the pitying looks and whispered gossip, back to the shell of a life I'd abandoned. And I'd rather face wolves than face that. The decision, when it came, felt less like a choice and more like surrender. When the sun finally rose, painting the frost-covered clearing in shades of gold and pink, I was sitting on the porch steps with a cup of coffee gone cold in my hands. I'd changed into clean jeans and a flannel shirt, brushed my pale hair into some semblance of order, and waited. I didn't have to wait long. Dominic emerged from the tree line just after 8, now wearing different clothes, dark cargo pants and a thermal shirt that did nothing to hide the powerful build underneath. In daylight, he was somehow more intimidating. I could see the scars on his hands, the predatory grace in his movements, the way his eyes tracked everything with unnerving precision. You came back, I said unnecessarily. I said I would. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, maintaining distance. Giving me space, I realized. Have you decided? I'll stay. Under your protection. The words felt strange in my mouth, weighted with implications I didn't fully understand. But I need to know what that means, what you expect from me. He nodded, as though he'd expected this. It means you attend pack gatherings when required. It means you learn our laws and follow them. It means you let me mark this territory as protected, so other wolves know to stay away. He paused. And it means you tell me if anything threatens you, human or otherwise. That's all? That's all. It sounded too simple, too easy. My ex-husband had started with simple requests too. Wear this dress to the dinner party. Don't mention you're writing to my colleagues. Smile more, laugh less loudly. Be smaller, quieter, less. I won't be owned again, I said quietly, surprised by the strength in my voice. I came here to be free. If your protection means a different kind of cage, then I'd rather take my chances with the wolves. For a long moment, he just stared at me. Then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth quirked upward. Not quite a smile, but close. You have fire in you. Good. You'll need it. He climbed the first step, then stopped, still leaving space between us. I'm not your ex-husband, Claire. I don't want to control you. I want to keep you alive. There's a difference. How do you know about my ex-husband? Small town. People talk. He said it without apology. And you have that look. The one people get when they've been broken down so slowly they didn't notice until pieces of them were already missing. The accuracy of it hit like a physical blow. I looked away, blinking against the unexpected sting in my eyes. I'm rebuilding those pieces, I know. I can see it in what you've done here. He gestured to the cabin. 3 months ago, this place was barely standing. Now it's a home. That takes strength. Something in my chest loosened slightly. When was the last time someone had noticed my strength instead of my weakness? There's a gathering tomorrow night, Dominic said, his tone shifting to something more formal. The pack meets every full moon. You'll need to come, to be introduced, to be acknowledged as under my protection. My stomach dropped. A pack meeting. It's necessary. If they don't see you, if they don't hear me claim responsibility for you, the young wolves will continue to test boundaries. Some of them. He trailed off, but I understood the unspoken warning. Will they accept it? A human under your protection. They'll accept it because I'm their alpha, and my word is law. but something in his tone suggested it wouldn't be quite that simple. Wear layers. It'll be cold. And Claire? His amber eyes found mine again. Stay close to me. Don't wander off, don't accept challenges, don't show fear. They can smell it, and some will see it as weakness. What kind of challenges? The kind you won't win. He turned to leave, then paused. I'll come for you tomorrow at sunset. Be ready. And then he was gone again, leaving me alone with a cabin that suddenly felt far less like a sanctuary and far more like the eye of a storm. The next day passed in a haze of anxiety and frantic preparation. I cleaned the cabin with manic intensity, as though dirt and disorder were enemies I could actually defeat. I tried on different outfits, discarding each one as either too formal or too casual, too revealing or too dowdy, until I finally settled on dark jeans, sturdy boots, and a fitted black sweater that at least made me look more confident than I felt. My reflection in the small mirror showed a woman I barely recognized. Pale hair pulled back in a practical braid, face thinner than it had been, eyes shadowed, but determined. I looked like someone who belonged in these woods. I just hoped I looked like someone who belonged at a werewolf gathering. The sun set with brutal efficiency, plunging the forest into darkness punctuated only by early stars and a rising moon that was almost, but not quite, full. When the knock came, I jumped, despite expecting it. Dominic stood on the porch in what I was beginning to recognize as his usual attire, dark, practical, with that same controlled intensity radiating from every line of his body. Ready? He asked. No. Yes. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Stay close. Don't speak unless spoken to directly. And remember, you're under my protection. That means something. We walked into the forest together, his stride long and confident while I struggled to keep pace over uneven ground. He didn't slow down, but he didn't leave me behind either, maintaining a distance that felt deliberate. How far? I asked, my breath already coming faster. 2 miles. We walk on human feet out of respect. It's considered aggressive to approach in wolf form uninvited. 2 miles through dark forest. My city-soft legs protested, but I gritted my teeth and kept moving. The clearing emerged from the darkness like something out of a fever dream. Torches ringed the space, real flames, not electric lights, casting flickering shadows that made everything move and breathe. At the center burned a massive bonfire, its heat reaching me even from the tree line where Dominic had paused. And surrounding it, gathered in loose clusters that somehow still managed to convey hierarchy and order, were the wolves. Not wolves, people. But the way they moved, the way they watched us approach, left no doubt about what they were underneath their human skin. There were perhaps 40 of them, ranging from teenagers to elders with silver-streaked hair. The younger ones stood toward the outer edges, restless energy evident in their constant movement. The older ones sat closer to the fire, their stillness somehow more intimidating than any display of aggression. And at the very center, in positions of clear authority, stood 3 figures who radiated power like heat. My second, my third, and my enforcer, Dominic murmured, so quietly only I could hear. Sebastian, Elena, and Grant. They're the ones you need to watch. Sebastian was lean and dark-haired, with sharp features and eyes that assessed me with clinical precision. Elena was stunning in a way that made my chest tight. Tall, with copper-red hair that caught the firelight like living flame, curves that my ex-husband would have called real woman, while implying I lacked them. And Grant was simply massive, built like violence made flesh, with scars visible on his forearms, and a face that suggested he rarely smiled. All 3 watched us approach with varying degrees of interest and hostility. The gathered pack fell silent as Dominic stepped into the clearing, his hand finding the small of my back. Possessive, protective, or both. I could feel dozens of eyes on me, taking in my pale hair, my smaller frame, my obvious humanity. The weight of their attention was suffocating. My pack. Dominic's voice carried across the clearing with natural authority. I bring before you Claire Whitmore, who has claimed the abandoned cabin on our borderland as her home. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, not friendly ones. She is human, someone called out, a young man near the back, his voice sharp with challenge. "She has no place here. She has the place I give her." Dominic replied, his tone hardening. "By my authority as Alpha, I claim responsibility for her safety and her actions. She is under my protection. Any wolf who harms her answers to me personally." The silence that followed was heavier than the murmurs had been. Sebastian stepped forward, his movements liquid and controlled. "With respect, Alpha, the pack has concerns. Humans on borderland create complications. They attract attention from town, from hunters, from those who would use her presence as excuse to encroach on our territory. Then we ensure she doesn't become such an excuse." Dominic's hand was still on my back, steady and warm. "Claire has lived there 3 months already. She's bothered no one, threatened no one. She asks only to be left in peace." Peace. Elena's voice was smoky and sharp. She moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing exactly how beautiful she was, and exactly how to use it. The kind of peace that comes from ignorance. She doesn't know our laws, our ways. How can she follow rules she doesn't understand? Then we teach her. Dominic's response was immediate. "As we would teach any newcomer to the pack." "She's not pack," Grant growled, speaking for the first time. His voice was gravel and threat. "She'll never be pack. She's a liability." The word stung more than it should have. I'd spent 5 years being called a liability by my ex-husband. Too emotional, too impractical, too much of a dreamer to be useful in his carefully constructed world. Hearing it again, from this scarred stranger who didn't know me at all, made something hot and angry unfurl in my chest. "Then I'll be a liability that minds her own business and stays out of your way." The words escaped before I could stop them, my voice carrying across the clearing with unexpected strength. The silence that followed was absolute. I felt Dominic tense beside me, his fingers pressing slightly harder against my back. Around the clearing, wolves shifted and murmured. I'd broken his instruction, don't speak unless spoken to directly, but I couldn't take it back now. Elena laughed, the sound surprisingly genuine. "She has teeth. Small ones, but teeth nonetheless." "She has stupidity," the young wolf from before called out, speaking to the enforcer like that. "She should learn respect." "Or what?" I turned toward the voice, my fear transmuting into something reckless. "You'll teach me? Add me to the list of threats I should be terrified of?" I was shaking, but not backing down. I came here to escape people who tried to make me small and quiet. I'm not doing that again. Not for anyone. The young wolf moved forward, his body language aggressive, but Dominic shifted, just slightly, but enough to put himself more firmly between us. "Enough, Marcus." His voice was soft but deadly. "Challenge her again and you challenge me." The young wolf, Marcus, froze, then slowly backed down, though his eyes never left me. The hatred there was palpable, personal, as though my mere existence offended him. "The human has spirit," Sebastian observed, his clinical assessment continuing. "But spirit without wisdom is dangerous, to herself and to us." "Then I'll ensure she gains wisdom." Dominic's tone brooked no argument. "Is there any wolf here who wishes to formally challenge my decision?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Around the clearing, wolves looked at each other, at their alpha, at me. Several looked like they wanted to speak, but none did. The hierarchy held. Then, it settled. Dominic's hand fell away from my back. "Claire Whitmore is under my protection. Harm her, and you answer to me, now." His tone shifted, became almost normal. "We have other business to attend to. The northern boundary markers need reinforcing. The town council has been making noises about expanding their hunting permits, and there's been sign of rogues passing through the eastern edge." The gathering shifted focus, breaking into smaller discussions. I stood rooted to the spot, my heart hammering, unsure if I should move or stay or disappear into the forest. Around me, wolves conducted their business with an ease that spoke of long practice, discussing territory, resolving disputes, sharing information with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. Elena approached, her movements graceful and deliberate. Up close, she was even more striking. Amber eyes like Dominic's, but with flecks of green and a smile that didn't quite reach them. "You're braver than you look," she said, her tone impossible to read, or more foolish. I haven't decided which. "Does it matter?" I asked quietly. "Perhaps not." She studied me with unnerving intensity. "But you should know. Dominic doesn't extend protection lightly. The last time he claimed responsibility for someone outside the pack, it ended—" She paused, choosing her words carefully, badly. My stomach dropped. What happened? "Ask him yourself, if you dare." She smiled then, sharp and knowing. "Word of advice, human? Don't fall for him. He's already broken, and broken things tend to break whatever they touch." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me with more questions than answers, and a growing sense that I'd stepped into something far more complicated than I'd realized. The gathering lasted for hours. I stood awkwardly at the edge of the firelight, trying to be invisible while simultaneously being the most visible thing there. Some wolves ignored me completely. Others watched with open curiosity or barely concealed hostility. A few, mostly the older ones, nodded at me with something that might have been respect or pity. Grant, the enforcer, kept his distance but never stopped watching. His scrutiny felt different from the others, more analytical, as though he were calculating exactly how much of a threat I posed and how best to neutralize it. Sebastian approached me once, his manner formal and correct. "You should understand the laws you're now subject to," he said without preamble. "First, no human may witness the change without permission. Second, pack business stays within the pack. Third, challenges must be witnessed and sanctioned. Fourth, the Alpha's word is final law. And if I break these laws," his smile was thin, "then you discover why Grant is called Enforcer." He left me with that pleasant thought. As the moon climbed higher, some of the younger wolves began to shift. Not all at once, but in ones and twos, shedding their human forms for something wilder. I tried not to stare, but it was impossible not to watch. The change was fluid and beautiful and deeply unsettling. Bodies reforming with sounds that shouldn't exist. Fur rippling across skin like water. Dominic found me as the first wolves began to run into the forest, their howls echoing through the darkness. "You did well," he said quietly. "I broke your rule about not speaking. You defended yourself when challenged. That's different." He looked tired suddenly, the firelight casting shadows under his eyes. "Marcus will be a problem. He's young, ambitious, and he sees you as weakness in my leadership. Because you're protecting a human, because I'm protecting someone who can't protect herself," he corrected. "It makes me look soft, and in a pack, soft equals weak." Guilt twisted in my chest. "I didn't mean to cause problems for you." "You didn't cause them. You revealed them." He watched the wolves running in the distance, their forms barely visible in the moonlight. "My pack is strong, but there are fractures. Young wolves who think they deserve more. Old wolves who resist change. And now you. A symbol that I'm willing to break tradition. Maybe I should leave after all." "No." The word was firm. "You leave, and Marcus wins." "You leave, and every wolf who questioned my decision sees it as proof they were right." His jaw tightened. "You stay, and we prove them wrong." "We?" He looked at me then, really looked at me, and something in his expression made my breath catch. "I meant what I said, Claire. You're under my protection. That's not a burden I take lightly." Before I could respond, a howl split the night, different from the others, carrying a note of alarm. Dominic's head snapped toward the sound, his body going rigid. "That's a warning." He was already moving toward the tree line. "Stay with Sebastian." "What's happening?" He didn't answer, just shifted mid-stride, human to wolf in a heartbeat, his clothes falling away as his body reformed into something massive and dark and terrifying. Then he was gone, vanishing into the forest with several other wolves following. Sebastian appeared at my elbow. "Come. We need to secure the clearing." "What was that howl?" "Rogues." His expression was grim. "On our territory. This is very bad timing." The remaining wolves gathered closer to the fire, their easy camaraderie replaced by tension. Elena stood with her arms crossed, staring into the forest where Dominic had disappeared. Grant was organizing the younger wolves into some kind of defensive formation. And I stood there, useless and human, understanding for the first time exactly how dangerous this world really was. The howls continued in the distance, aggressive, challenging, answered by the deeper tones of Dominic and his wolves. I couldn't understand the language, but I could hear the violence in it, the promise of it. "How long will they be?" I asked Sebastian. "As long as it takes." He didn't look at me, his attention fixed on the forest. Rogues are unpredictable. They might run or they might fight. Either way, there will be consequences. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The fire burned lower, the moon climbed higher, and still the sounds of confrontation echoed through the thornwood. When the wolves finally returned, I knew immediately something was wrong. Dominic emerged from the trees in human form, someone's jacket hastily thrown over his shoulders, his face dark with fury. Behind him, Grant and several others carried what looked like an injured wolf, a gray female, her side matted with red, not matted, bleeding. I looked away quickly, my stomach turning, but not before I saw the extent of the damage. Whatever had happened out there, it had been brutal. "Get Rachel to the healer," Dominic ordered, his voice raw. "Now!" Wolves scattered to obey. The clearing descended into controlled chaos, some shifting to human form, others maintaining their wolf shapes, all moving with purpose. Elena approached Dominic, speaking too quietly for me to hear. Whatever she said made his expression darken further. He responded with sharp gestures, argument evident even without words. Sebastian touched my arm. "We should get you back to your cabin. What happened out there? Nothing you need to concern yourself with." But his tone suggested it was very much something I should be concerned about. "Come. Dominic will want you safe before he deals with this." I let him guide me toward the tree line, but I couldn't stop looking back at the clearing, at the wolves in crisis, at the injured female being carried away, at Dominic standing in the firelight with blood on his hands and murder in his eyes. I'd wanted to understand their world. Now I was beginning to, and it terrified me. Sebastian walked me back through the forest in silence, his presence somehow both reassuring and unsettling. Unlike Dominic, who moved with predatory purpose, Sebastian glided through the darkness with an efficiency that suggested he could disappear at will if he chose. When we reached my cabin, he paused at the tree line rather than approaching the porch. "Lock your doors tonight," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "The rogues are gone, but they'll remember there's a human here now. That makes you a target." "Why?" The question burst out before I could stop it. "Why would rogues care about me?" His eyes caught the moonlight, reflecting it back like mirrors. "Because you're the easiest way to hurt Dominic. An alpha's strength is measured by his ability to protect. You're his stated responsibility. Harm you, and they prove he's weak." He tilted his head slightly. "It's pack politics, brutal, but effective. I never asked to be a weapon against him. No one ever does." Something that might have been sympathy flickered across his features, "But you are now, whether you wish it or not. So lock your doors, keep your shotgun loaded, and if anything approaches this cabin that isn't Dominic, don't hesitate." He was gone before I could respond, melting into the shadows with the same unnerving grace. I stood on my porch for a long time, watching the forest, listening to the distant sounds that might have been wind or might have been wolves. The moon was bright enough to cast shadows, turning familiar trees into threatening shapes. Inside, I did exactly as Sebastian had instructed. Locked every door, checked every window, loaded the shotgun my grandfather had left behind, and propped it within easy reach. Then I sat on my sleeping bag with my back against the wall and waited for dawn. It came eventually, as it always did, painting the world in shades of gray and gold that made last night feel like a fever dream, except for the blood under my fingernails. I stared at my hands in the morning light, trying to remember when I'd touched anything that could have left those dark crescents. Then the memory surfaced, grabbing Dominic's arm as he'd moved past me in the clearing, my fingers digging in without conscious thought, seeking anchor in the chaos. His blood, or someone else's. Either way, it was there, a physical reminder that this wasn't a story or a nightmare. This was my life now. I scrubbed my hands raw in the cold water from the well, then threw myself into work with desperate energy. There were still repairs to be made, always repairs. The cabin was livable, but far from finished. I spent the morning replacing a cracked window pane, trying to focus on the simple physical task instead of the memory of wolves howling and that injured female being carried away. Rachel, Dominic had called her. A name, a person, someone who might be dying because of rogues who'd invaded their territory. Invaded partly because I was here, a tempting target. The guilt sat heavy in my chest, making it hard to breathe. I was so focused on the window that I didn't hear the approach until a voice spoke behind me. "You have steady hands," I spun, dropping the putty knife with a clatter. Elena stood at the edge of my porch, looking impossibly elegant despite wearing simple jeans and a leather jacket. In daylight, she was even more intimidating. Beauty weaponized. Every movement calculated to remind you exactly how far above you she stood. "I didn't hear you," I managed, my heart racing. "I know. That was intentional." She stepped onto the porch, examining the new window with critical eyes. Not bad work, for a human. The qualifier stung, but I refused to rise to it. "Did you need something?" Dominic sent me. She turned her attention from the window to me, and I felt pinned by that amber gaze. "He's dealing with pack business, the aftermath of last night. He wanted to ensure you were settled." "I'm fine." "Are you?" She leaned against the porch railing I'd repaired last week, testing its strength with casual confidence. "You witnessed pack justice, saw violence, learned exactly how dangerous this world is. Most humans would be packing to leave right now. I'm not most humans." "No," she agreed slowly. "You're not. Which makes you either very brave or very stupid. I'm still determining which." She paused, then added, "Rachel will survive, by the way, if you were wondering. The healer says she'll be back on her feet within the week." Relief flooded through me so powerfully I had to grip the windowsill for support. "That's good. Thank you for telling me. Don't thank me. Thank Dominic. He's the one who got to her before the rogues finished what they started." Elena's expression hardened. "They were trying to kill her, Claire, not scare her, not wound her. Kill. Because she was patrolling the border near your cabin. Because protecting you made her a target. The guilt I'd been trying to suppress crashed over me like a wave. I didn't ask for that. No. You just stumbled into our world and expected no consequences." Her tone was sharp, cutting. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Dominic hasn't claimed responsibility for an outsider in 8 years, not since—" She stopped abruptly, her jaw tightening. "Since what?" "Since the last person he tried to protect died because he wasn't strong enough to save them." The words were delivered with brutal efficiency. His sister. Human father, wolf mother. A hybrid who never quite fit in either world. She was murdered by rogues who wanted to prove that Dominic's protection meant nothing. The world tilted slightly. I sat down hard on the porch steps, my legs suddenly unable to support me. He never said. Why would he? It's not exactly something he advertises. Elena's expression softened fractionally. "Look, I'm not telling you this to be cruel. I'm telling you so you understand what's at stake. Dominic extending his protection to you isn't just politics, it's personal. And if something happens to you, if the rogues or Marcus or any of the wolves who see you as weakness manage to hurt you," she trailed off. But the implication was clear. "It would break him." I finished quietly. "It would destroy him," she corrected. "And that would destroy the pack. We've been stable for 8 years because Dominic is strong, controlled, unshakable. But you?" She gestured at me, at the cabin, at everything. "You're a crack in that armor." And cracks spread. I looked up at her, this stunning wolf who carried authority like a second skin. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to be worth it." Her tone was fierce. "If you're going to be here, if you're going to accept his protection and let good wolves get hurt defending you, then be worth that sacrifice. Learn, adapt, become strong enough that you're an asset instead of a liability. And if I can't, then leave before it's too late." She pushed off from the railing, preparing to go, before someone else gets hurt. before Dominic has to bury another person he failed to save. She was halfway across the clearing when I called out, "Why are you telling me this? If you want me gone, why not just let me fail?" Elena looked back, and for the first time, I saw something other than hostility in her expression, something that might have been respect. "Because I don't actually want you to fail," she said. "I want you to succeed. Because maybe, just maybe, if you can survive this world, it means there's hope for those of us who are trapped between two lives." She paused. "My mother was human, like Dominic's father. I know what it's like to be seen as less than. And I know what it takes to prove them wrong." Then she was gone, leaving me alone with more revelations than I knew how to process. The days that followed fell into an uneasy rhythm. Dominic didn't return to my cabin, but I felt his presence nonetheless, in the increased patrols I glimpsed through the trees, in the scent markers that appeared overnight around my property, in the way the forest felt more protected and more surveilled simultaneously. I threw myself into learning, driven by Elena's words. Sebastian appeared every few days, teaching me pack law with the precision of a professor. Grant showed up once, demonstrated how to use the shotgun properly, and left with a grunt that might have been approval. Even some of the younger wolves began to acknowledge me, nods from a distance, nothing friendly, but a recognition that I existed within their world. Marcus remained a constant threat, his hostility palpable even when I only glimpsed him watching from the tree line. But he never approached, never challenged, held back by the weight of Dominic's authority. 2 weeks after the gathering, I was splitting firewood when I felt the familiar prickle of being watched. I turned to find Dominic standing at the edge of the clearing, wearing the same dark jeans and thermal shirt I'd first seen him in, his expression unreadable. "You've been avoiding me," I said, setting down the axe. "I've been giving you space." He moved closer, his gaze traveling over the cabin, the neat woodpile, the winter vegetables I'd started growing in a small plot. "You've been busy. Elena said I needed to be worth protecting." I wiped sweat from my forehead with my sleeve, "So I'm trying." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or approval. "She told you about my sister. It wasn't a question. But I nodded anyway. I'm sorry. For your loss. And for making you relive it by being here." "Don't." His tone was sharp. "Don't apologize for existing, Claire. You didn't ask to be born human any more than I asked to be born wolf." He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture of frustration. "My sister's death wasn't about weakness. It was about cruelty. About rogues who killed her simply because they could. Because she represented something they hated, the mixing of worlds. But you blame yourself anyway, every day." The admission was raw, unguarded. I was supposed to protect her. I was alpha even then, young and arrogant, certain my authority meant something. And then they took her. And I learned exactly how much my authority was worth. I moved toward him without thinking, closing the distance between us. Up close, I could see the scars on his hands more clearly. Some silvered with age, others newer. Evidence of violence, of survival, of a life spent fighting. "I won't be her," I said quietly. "I won't be another loss for you to carry." "You can't promise that." "No," I agreed, "but I can promise to fight, to learn. To not make it easy for anyone who wants to use me against you." I held his gaze. Elena was right. I need to be worth protecting, and I will be. For a long moment, he just looked at me. Then, slowly, his hand rose to brush a strand of pale hair from my face, a gesture so gentle it made my breath catch. "You already are," he said softly. "You just don't see it yet." The moment stretched between us, charged with something I didn't have words for. His hand lingered near my face, close enough to feel the heat of his skin, far enough to maintain that careful distance he always kept. Then his expression shifted, hardened, and he stepped back. "There's going to be another gathering. 3 days from now. The pack wants to discuss increased patrols, new boundary protocols. You should be there. More pack politics, more proving that you belong." His tone was gentle but firm. "They need to see you as part of the territory, not a temporary problem. The more you participate, the less they can argue against your presence. And Marcus is being watched closely." Dominic's jaw tightened. "He made a move last week, Tried to rally some of the younger wolves, suggested they petition for your removal. Grant shut it down before it gained traction. But it's a sign. He's not going to let this go. Maybe I should talk to him. Explain that I'm not trying to cause problems. No. The word was absolute. You don't approach Marcus. You don't engage with him. He sees you as a symbol of everything wrong with my leadership, and nothing you say will change that. He needs to challenge me, not you. But he can't challenge you directly, not without cause, no. But he's young and ambitious. He'll make a mistake eventually, and when he does... Dominic trailed off, but the promise in his tone was clear. I thought about pack justice, about the violence I'd witnessed, about Rachel bleeding in the clearing. What happens when an alpha is challenged? Either the challenger submits and is exiled, or they fight to the end. He said it calmly, as though discussing the weather. There's no middle ground. The pack can't have two alphas. So one of you dies. Usually, yes. He met my eyes without flinching, but it's rare. Most wolves know better than to challenge an established alpha. The hierarchy is there for a reason. It keeps us stable, keeps us from tearing ourselves apart. And if Marcus challenges anyway, then I'll handle it. His tone suggested the conversation was over. 3 days, Claire. Sunset. I'll come for you. He left before I could respond. But this time, he paused at the tree line and looked back. Thank you, he called out. For staying. For trying. It matters more than you know. Then he was gone, leaving me in the clearing with a racing heart, and the growing realization that somewhere along the way, this had stopped being about survival and started being about something far more dangerous. Something that felt disturbingly like belonging. The 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and mounting tension. I spent them learning everything I could, memorizing pack laws from the notes Sebastian had left me, practicing with the shotgun until my shoulder ached from the recoil, even attempting to track the patrol patterns I'd observed from my porch. If I was going to be part of this world, I needed to understand it, not just survive in it, but truly belong. On the morning of the gathering, I woke to find a package on my porch. No note, no explanation, just a carefully wrapped bundle tied with rough twine. Inside was a jacket, heavy leather, lined with fur, clearly used but well maintained. It smelled of pine and something else, something wild and indefinably wolf. When I slipped it on, it fit perfectly, the weight of it settling on my shoulders like armor. Protection, I realized. Someone, Dominic probably, had left me protection against the cold night ahead. I wore it that evening as I waited for sunset, pacing my cabin with nervous energy. Through the window, I watched the light fade from gold to amber to deep purple, painting the forest in shadows. When the knock finally came, I was ready. Or as ready as I could be. Dominic stood on my porch, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. His eyes traveled over the jacket I wore, and something in his expression softened. It suits you, he said quietly. Thank you. For this. I gestured to the leather. I'm guessing it was you? Elena, actually. She said if you were going to keep showing up at pack gatherings, you should at least look like you belonged. He paused. It was hers, from before she rose to third. She doesn't part with things easily. The gesture meant more than I could articulate. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We walked through the forest together, and this time the journey felt different. Less like being led into danger, and more like walking alongside someone who understood exactly what that danger meant. Dominic maintained that careful distance, but occasionally his hand would touch my back to guide me around obstacles, or he'd slow his pace when the terrain became difficult. Small gestures, meaningful ones. The clearing was already full when we arrived, the bonfire burning high and bright against the darkening sky. The pack had gathered in their usual formations, but something felt different tonight. The energy was sharper, more focused, hostile. Marcus stood near the fire, surrounded by a cluster of younger wolves who watched us approach with undisguised antagonism. Sebastian and Elena flanked Dominic's usual position, their expressions grim, and Grant stood slightly apart, his massive frame tense, ready for violence. This wasn't just a gathering, this was a confrontation. Alpha, Sebastian said as we entered the clearing, his tone formal and warning. Marcus has invoked his right to speak before the pack. I advised waiting for your arrival. Dominic's hand fell away from my back. Then let him speak. Marcus stepped forward, his movements aggressive, challenging. He was younger than I'd initially thought, perhaps 25, with the kind of raw energy that hadn't yet learned control. His eyes fixed on me with pure hatred. I speak for those who believe our alpha has lost his way, he announced, his voice carrying across the clearing. For 8 years, Dominic Ashford has led us with strength and wisdom. But now he brings a human into our midst, grants her protections meant only for pack, and asks us to risk our lives defending someone who contributes nothing. Murmurs rippled through the gathered wolves, some nodding, others watching Dominic with uncertain expressions. She's a liability, Marcus continued, gaining confidence. Rachel nearly died protecting her. Our patrols are stretched thin, watching over someone who can't defend herself. And for what? Because the Alpha feels guilty over his sister's death? Because he wants to prove he can save a human this time? The words hit like physical blows. I felt Dominic go rigid beside me, saw his hands curl into fists. Careful, Marcus, Sebastian warned softly. You're approaching challenge territory. Good. Marcus's smile was sharp, feral. Because I am challenging, not for leadership. I'm not fool enough for that. But I'm challenging the decision to harbor this human. I demand the pack vote on her removal. The clearing erupted into chaos. Wolves arguing, shouting, some supporting Marcus while others defended Dominic's authority. Elena moved closer to where I stood, her presence protective even as her expression remained neutral. This is bad, she murmured, too quietly for anyone else to hear. A vote undermines Dominic's authority. Even if he wins, it shows the pack is divided. Then I need to speak, I whispered back. But I was already stepping forward, moving past Dominic before he could stop me. The gathered wolves fell silent as I walked toward the fire, toward Marcus, my heart hammering but my steps steady. You want to talk about what I contribute? My voice shook slightly, but I pushed through it. Fine, let's talk about it. I'm human, yes, weak compared to any of you. I can't shift, can't fight like you do, can't run through these woods with your speed and strength. Marcus's smile widened, triumphant. Finally, she admits. But I can think, I interrupted, my voice growing stronger. I can plan. I can see patterns and solve problems in ways that don't require teeth and claws. I turned to address the wider pack. Rachel was hurt protecting me, yes, and that guilt will stay with me forever. But do you know why the rogues targeted her? Because they knew attacking pack wolves near my cabin would create exactly this. Division, doubt, wolves questioning their alpha's judgment. I moved closer to the fire, feeling its heat on my face. They're using me as a weapon against you. And you're letting them. Every time you argue about my presence, every time you question Dominic's protection, you're doing exactly what they want. You're fracturing from within. Sebastian was watching me with sharp interest now. Elena had moved to stand beside Dominic, both of them focused on my words. I didn't choose to be here, I continued. Not in your territory, not in your world. But I am here. And I can either be the weakness they think I am, or I can be something else. Someone who sees threats you might miss because I think like the humans who want to push into your territory. Someone who can move through town without attracting attention, gathering information. Someone who understands the human world in ways you never can. I turned back to Marcus. You see a liability. I see potential. And the only question is whether you're smart enough to see it too, or whether you're going to keep making the rogue's job easier by tearing your pack apart. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, unexpectedly, Grant laughed. A deep, rumbling sound that seemed to surprise even him. The human has teeth, after all, and venom. She makes valid points, Sebastian added, his clinical assessment returning. The rogues are using her presence strategically. Removing her now might appear as if they've won. More than that, Elena said, her voice carrying authority. She's right about information gathering. We've been so focused on strength that we've forgotten intelligence has value too. Marcus's expression darkened. You're all making excuses. No, Dominic interrupted, his voice cutting through the clearing like a blade. He moved to stand beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. They're recognizing reality, something you've been too young and too proud to do. He addressed the pack, his presence commanding absolute attention. Marcus invoked the right to speak, and Claire answered him. Not with my words, but with her own. She defended herself, defended her place here, without asking for my protection. He paused, letting that sink in. How many of you could say the same when you first joined this pack? How many of you had to prove your worth before you were accepted? Murmurs again, but different this time. Thoughtful, rather than hostile. I claim responsibility for Claire Whitmore, Dominic continued. Not because she's weak, but because she's vulnerable in ways we no longer are. And yes, maybe there's guilt in that choice. Maybe I am trying to prove I can protect someone this time, but that doesn't make the choice wrong. His gaze swept across the gathered wolves. This pack was built on the principle that strength comes in many forms. Are we now saying that only one kind of strength matters? The question hung in the air, unanswerable and profound. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it, his challenge deflating in the face of Dominic's words and my unexpected defense. I call for the vote, Elena said formally. All who believe Claire Whitmore should retain alpha protection and remain in territory stand with Dominic. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Sebastian stepped forward, positioning himself clearly on Dominic's side. Grant followed, his massive frame impossible to ignore. Elena moved to join them. One by one, the older wolves shifted, forming a clear majority. Some of the younger wolves hesitated, looking between Marcus and the growing group supporting Dominic. Then, slowly, even they began to move. Not all, but enough. Marcus stood with perhaps 6 wolves remaining beside him. His face was twisted with fury and humiliation, but the vote was clear. The pack has spoken, Dominic said quietly. Claire stays, and any wolf who challenges that decision challenges me directly. Is that understood? Marcus's jaw worked, muscles jumping beneath skin. For a moment, I thought he might actually challenge. Then he nodded once, sharp and bitter, and stalked toward the tree line. His supporters followed, leaving the clearing with their defeat written in every line of their bodies. The tension broke, like a snapped wire. Wolves resumed their conversations, the gathering continuing as though nothing had happened. But something had shifted fundamentally. I could feel it in the way some of the younger wolves nodded at me as they passed, in the way Grant actually smiled, a brief, scarred expression that transformed his face entirely. That was incredibly stupid and incredibly brave, Elena said, appearing at my elbow. Congratulations. You've officially earned your place, just like that. Just like that. She glanced at Dominic, who was deep in conversation with Sebastian. You stood up for yourself when it mattered. In pack culture, that means everything. Grant approached, his scarred hands clasped behind his back. The offer stands human. If you want training, real training in how to defend yourself, find me. He paused. You'll never be wolf, but you can be dangerous. That's worth something. He walked away before I could respond, leaving me slightly dazed. The gathering continued for hours, but the hostile edge had disappeared. Wolves approached me throughout the night, some curious, some friendly, some simply acknowledging my presence. I learned names, heard stories, began to understand the complex web of relationships that bound the pack together. And through it all, I was aware of Dominic watching me, not hovering, not interfering, but present. Protective in that careful way he had, giving me space to establish myself while making it clear he was there if needed. When the moon reached its zenith and wolves began to shift and run, he found me again. Walk with me? He asked quietly. We left the clearing together, moving through the forest in comfortable silence. He led me along a path I didn't recognize, deeper into territory I hadn't yet explored. Eventually, we emerged onto a ridge overlooking the valley below, Millhaven visible in the distance as scattered lights against darkness. This is where I come when I need to think, he said, settling onto a flat rock. When pack politics and territorial disputes and all of it becomes too much. I sat beside him, close enough that our shoulders almost touched. It's beautiful. It is. He was quiet for a moment, then added, What you did tonight, standing up to Marcus, defending yourself. I need you to know what that meant. Not just for the pack, but for me. I turned to look at him, finding his profile etched in moonlight. Elena told me about your sister, about what happened. I figured she would. His jaw tightened. Sophia. Her name was Sophia, and she was exactly like you, human world sensibilities, soft heart, but with this core of steel that people underestimated. When the rogues took her, I tracked them for 3 days. By the time I found her, he stopped, his hands clenching. By the time I found her, there was nothing left to save, just pieces of someone I'd loved and failed to protect. My hand found his, fingers wrapping around his clenched fist. He startled at the contact, then slowly relaxed, his hand opening to accept mine. For 8 years, I've carried that failure, he continued, his voice raw. Told myself I'd never put anyone in that position again, never claim responsibility I couldn't fulfill. And then you showed up, this stubborn human rebuilding a cabin in the middle of nowhere, and I saw her all over again. He looked at me then, amber eyes luminous. But you're not her, Claire. You're your own person, with your own strength. And tonight, you proved that. Not just to the pack, but to me. I'm still human, I said softly. Still vulnerable. Yes, but vulnerability isn't the same as weakness. I'm learning that. His thumb traced small circles on the back of my hand, the gesture unconscious, intimate. You asked me once why I cared, why I extended my protection, and I told you it was because you spoke to me like a person, not a monster. I remember. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. He shifted closer, his free hand rising to cup my face with heartbreaking gentleness. The whole truth is that when I saw you sitting on that porch, wrapped in a blanket, speaking softly to a wolf that could have torn you apart, I saw courage, real courage, the kind that acts despite fear, not because of its absence. And I thought, if someone like that can be brave in this world, maybe there's hope for the rest of us. My breath caught. We were close enough now that I could see the flecks of gold in his amber eyes, the scars on his face that told stories of survival, the tension in his jaw that spoke of 8 years of self-imposed isolation. I'm falling for you, I whispered, the admission terrifying and liberating at once. I know I shouldn't. I know it's complicated and dangerous and probably stupid, but I am. Claire. No, let me finish. I needed to say this before courage failed. I came here broken, running from a marriage where I was made to feel small and insignificant. And somehow, in the middle of a forest surrounded by creatures that could kill me without effort, I found myself again. I found strength I didn't know I had. And I paused, searching for words. I found someone who sees me, really sees me. Not what I should be or could be, but what I am. You're remarkable, he said softly. Exactly as you are. So are you. I lifted my free hand to mirror his, touching his face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw, the warmth of his skin. You're not broken, Dominic. You're wounded. There's a difference. And wounds can heal, given time and care. Claire, he said again. But this time my name sounded like prayer. If we do this, if we cross this line, there's no going back. You'll be bound to me in ways the pack will recognize. You'll be marked as mine, and that makes you an even bigger target. I know. Marcus will see it as proof of everything he believes. Others might follow his thinking. You could be in more danger, not less. I know, I repeated, but I'm tired of making decisions based on fear. I'm tired of running from things that might hurt me. I want to run toward something for once. Someone. For a long moment, he simply looked at me, amber eyes searching mine for doubt or hesitation. Then, slowly, deliberately, he leaned in and kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was 8 years of isolation and grief and loneliness, crashing against 3 months of rebuilding and hope, and tentative connection. His lips were firm, demanding, but I met him with equal intensity, pouring everything I felt into that kiss. Gratitude, desire, defiance, love. When we finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "You're mine now," he said. And it wasn't a question or a command, just a statement of fact. In every way that matters to the pack, you're mine, and I'm yours. That's the bond we just made. Good, I whispered. Because I wasn't planning on letting you go. We sat like that for a long time, wrapped together on that ridge overlooking the valley, two damaged people finding unexpected healing in each other. The moon climbed higher, casting silver light across the forest, and for the first time since my marriage imploded, I felt truly at peace. 3 months later, winter settled over the Thornwood Forest with teeth and claws of ice. My cabin, our cabin now, because Dominic spent more nights there than in his own territory home, had transformed completely. Proper insulation, a working fireplace, windows that didn't let in drafts. The sleeping bag had been replaced with an actual bed. The camp stove had given way to a small kitchen. It looked like a home because it was one. I'd learned to track, to hunt, to read the forest signs that meant danger or safety. Grant had made good on his offer of training, teaching me to shoot with precision, to move quietly, to survive. Sebastian still brought me books on pack law, but now we discussed applications rather than just theory. Elena had become something close to a friend, her sharp edges softening into respect and occasional warmth. And Marcus had left the pack 2 weeks after the vote, unable to accept what he saw as weakness in his alpha. 6 wolves had gone with him, forming their own small group somewhere to the north. There had been some tension, some posturing, but no violence. Yet. "He'll be back," Dominic had said when news reached us. "Alone or with an army. Men like Marcus don't forget perceived slights." But for now, there was peace. I stood on the porch on a crystalline December morning, coffee steaming in my hands, watching smoke rise from the chimney into a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Behind me, I heard Dominic moving around inside. The scrape of a chair, the clink of dishes, domestic sounds that still had the power to make my chest tight with happiness. The divorce papers had been finalized last month. Claire Whitmore was legally free, officially single, and somehow more bound than she'd ever been in marriage. But it was a binding I'd chosen, a commitment made with eyes open and heart willing. "You're thinking too loud," Dominic said, emerging with his own coffee. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me against his warmth. I can hear it from inside, just thinking about how different everything is from a year ago. Better or worse? I turned in his arms, looking up at this man who was alpha and protector and partner and love. His dark hair was getting long, almost to his shoulders now. The shadows under his eyes had faded. He smiled more, laughed occasionally, had begun to let go of the guilt he'd carried for so long. "So much better," I said. "Even with the danger and the complications and the fact that your pack still isn't entirely sure about me. They're learning." His hand traced lazy patterns on my lower back. "Besides, after you helped Elena track that rogue pack movement through town last month, most of them came around. Turns out having someone who can move through human spaces without attracting attention is useful. Who would have thought?" I smiled against his chest. We stood like that for a long time, wrapped together against the cold, 2 people from different worlds who'd found unexpected belonging in each other. The forest was quiet around us, the peaceful quiet of winter, not the dangerous silence of predators watching. Inside, the cabin waited. Outside, the pack territory stretched for miles. And somewhere in between, I'd found what I'd been searching for all along. Not escape, not safety, not even love. Though that had come too. I'd found myself, the version of me that had been buried under years of trying to be what others needed. The version that was strong and vulnerable and brave and terrified and human in all the ways that mattered. Claire Whitmore, who'd come to the Thornwood Forest broken and lost, and emerged whole. "Come inside," Dominic murmured against my hair. "It's too cold out here. In a minute." I wanted to hold this moment a little longer. This perfect, peaceful, ordinary moment of standing on my porch with the man I loved, watching smoke rise into winter sky. Life wasn't perfect. Marcus remained a threat. The rogues were still out there. Town politics and pack dynamics provided constant challenges. But we faced them together, and that made all the difference. Eventually, the cold drove us inside. Dominic closed the door behind us, shutting out the winter wind, sealing us into warmth and firelight and the home we'd built from an abandoned cabin and broken pieces. And somewhere in the forest, wolves howled, not in threat or challenge, but in acknowledgement, the Alpha King and his human mate. Against all odds, against all expectations, finding their way forward, together.